Thanks very much for watching. Let's get straight into it right now with James Ashby, who, of course, did his best at the Queensland election, but, of course, continues all day, every day, working with Pauline Hanson there in the One Nation office, and his big brain was behind that excellent cartoon of which I was able to borrow ever so slightly a few seconds of. Well done, mate. I loved it. You and the Stepmates team. And Linda Scott, of course, she's free of all responsibility, so she can say whatever she wants. But it'll always be in service of the Labor Party. Now, let's get to the scare campaign of all scare campaigns, which begins before the election, which definitely won't be in May, despite the fact that he said that it was in May. Wow, what a card player. Here's part of their scare campaigning about Peter Dutton.
The average household will be around $7,600 worse off under Dutton. Dutton doesn't add up for working people. You'll be worse off under Dutton.
James, we are worse off under Albanese. Is anyone going to buy that?
Sure are. Well, sadly they do, Paul. This is where the negative advertising, look, it doesn't work on people who watch this program, clearly. They're more engaged and they understand what's going on behind the scenes and in day-to-day politics. But for the average person who is more worried about paying off their mortgage or trying to get a rental at an affordable price which doesn't leave them homeless, they're not tuned in to the media like you and I are. Can I also just point out, when you are not within an election period, it is half the price, if not a third of the price, to do advertising of this nature. So when you enter an election cycle, they've got a special rate card for the advertising of political content, but outside of that, it's a third of the price. So they are just eating away, just chipping away, bit by bit at the coalition here. If anything, what this advertising will probably do is favour minor parties like One Nation, because the public who will be watching this won't necessarily want to vote for Labor either. And they'll go, well, listen, we'll just place our bet with One Nation. So that's what's happening behind the scenes. And yes, it does work, whether you and I like it or not.
Well, and this is why, you know, you have to be dexterous enough to be able to respond to it. So we'll see what the Liberal Party does in the next while. Linda, does this show a proactive Labor Party that's not going to have its issues defined? They will define the issues?
No, I just think it shows that they're trying to get some truthful messages out there. I mean, we talked about the fact that Peter Dutton, when he was the Health Minister, tried to introduce a Medicare co-payment. He's now got nuclear power on the cards. You know, clearly CSIRO's recommended it's 50% more expensive than wind and renewable energy sources. So he's got all sorts of very expensive propositions on the table, but has also promised to go to the election with $100 billion worth of cuts, but not saying where they're going to come from, Paul. So I think we just need some honesty. The Australian people expect to know the details of the policy that the coalition is going to take to the election. They expect to know where the cuts are going to be made, and they expect to hear clearly from the Leader of the Opposition how on earth it is that he is going to make commitments about things that people will trust.
While you're talking about misinformation, I could challenge you on plenty, but let's just move on to the vote that's going to happen this week. Fatima Payman, one of those key left-leaning MPs and senators. Remember, they need a couple of them. They need three of them, sorry. But most of the five that are up for grabs have said no. She's the latest to say no to censoring the internet.
Freedom of speech is a pillar of our democracy, and this bill threatens that. Of course, misinformation and disinformation are a problem, but this bill isn't the answer. The powers it grants could lead to over-censorship, with the government deciding what does and doesn't count as the truth. That's not the Australia I believe in.
I love that, James, these people have all come to the decision that you and I made 2 years ago when we first heard about it. Well done for skewering them again in the cartoon as you did. So, Did I get the maths right when I was at the start of the show trying to explain where we are here, where basically Thorpe is the only unannounced one right now, but even if they get Thorpe and somehow there's a surprise with the former Liberal Senator in David Van, this thing would be one vote short and therefore dead on arrival. Is that your reading of the numbers tonight?
Yeah, you are spot on with those numbers. I doubt very much that Lydia Thorpe will come to the party on this, and David Van. I think this is a dead-in-the-water bill. Can I just take my hat off to Fatima Payman, because she is not only a woman of colour, but she's a migrant to this country and a Muslim who believes in free speech, unlike her colleague in the Senate, Marine Faruqi, who obviously doesn't believe in freedom of speech because of that 18C case. But well done to her for at least speaking out and saying she will not support this Labor bill. Look, you're right when you say that One Nation came to their senses years ago when the Coalition proposed this misinformation and disinformation bill from the get-go, you would have thought that Labor had learned a lesson when they dropped it, because they didn't have the numbers then. I don't think they're going to have the numbers in the coming week or fortnight, because, as you say, it could be one of those late-night sittings of Parliament where they try and rush this through because someone's fallen asleep on the couch in their office or gone home a little bit early. So watch this space. It's not dead yet, but with a bit of luck, they will not get this bill through.
Yeah, a couple of free holidays to some backbenchers from the LNP. We'll see what happens in the next little while. Now, of course, I know that Senator Faruqi speed dial for lawyers. Obviously, she would disagree with that suggestion. If she'd like to come on the program to state her case, she's more than welcome. Sorry, James, I just want to save myself from the meeting tomorrow. Now,
Fair enough.
So, Linda, again, this misinformation bill, if it looks like it's going to fail, do you fail quickly? Like just tactically, as a person who has been in a room, council, you can see that you're going to get there by a vote, or you're going to fall over by a vote? Do you wait to the end of 2 weeks and then basically have a 2-week storyline of failure? Or if it's going to die, do you kill it quickly?
Look, I think that, again, it's really disappointing that the Coalition have not decided to vote for this bill. I understand that they're always going to try and make this about free speech, but for the now increasingly millions of Australians that have been scammed, they're finding false information on the internet, and we've seen over the weekend in some of the Sydney Morning Herald papers, you know, these incredible videos, fake videos of leading Australian figures clearly selling fake financial products. I mean, these things
This isn't about
are
stopping
scamming.
scams. It's about people stopping the ability to share YouTube videos. The government doesn't.
These things are scamming real Australians.
I know.
Many Australians don't like to talk about it because they're embarrassed, but they're losing their houses.
Yeah, we're not talking about
tens
scams
or
here.
hundreds of thousands of dollars. And these kinds of bills are designed to prevent misinformation and disinformation and scams. Take them off the internet and give the responsibility
and we're going to have a chat about
to the big social media companies to have them have a penalty if they keep that information up and online.
Right.
I think Australians are listening to this, and I think they'll be disappointed that the Coalition is not trying to do everything they can to block and get in the way of those really serious and dangerous financial scams.
I think there's a reason why we haven't seen much polling on this, and that's because even left-wing organisations know this thing would poll very poorly. Censoring the internet has always been a terrible idea. Again, there are plenty of laws in place about what you can say that are outright lies, provable lies, defamation, all of these different things that are there. The concept of the government doesn't like, remember what they did during COVID. Anyway, we'll see what happens in the next couple of weeks. I would suggest if it's going to die, I hope it does so quickly, but if they drag it out for 2 weeks, hoping that they can send somebody to Tahiti for free, they're going to have a problem for yet another 2-week distraction. So the climate change in the 2025 election versus the 2022 election. Now, this was supposedly the climate change election, but then, of course, the decisions which have been made by this government cost an awful lot of money. They tried to hide that it would cost an awful lot of money, but it has. The result is, of course, power bills have gone up, despite the fact the promise was that it was going to be the opposite direction. But then, Linda, we get the government who took us on a long journey for a year and $500 million on the voice vote. Now are going to line up and try to get a conference that the Prime Minister doesn't deem important enough to attend this year or last year to be hosted in Australia for China to turn around and tell us that we need to collectively give them $1 and a bit trillion. Well,
look, first of all, I think the COP is a really important global process. It's really important because we know climate change is dangerous. It's based on science. You wouldn't think we're still having to make the case for the importance of acting on climate change, and yet here we are again. But more and more Australians are identifying this as a major issue. But we also know it's a global issue, and Australia can act on our own. We should take actions, but without a global consensus, it's really, really difficult to have a proper measurable impact on the way that we can stop climate change. Now, I think it's important for Australia to play our part in the global community. I think it's important from a climate change perspective, but it's also important from a security perspective. We've, of course, got all these incredible countries
but
just to our north.
But hasn't America just made a decision which means basically for 4 years one of the biggest players is out of the game?
Oh, I just don't think that's right. I mean, I do accept the fact that Donald Trump has said that he's going to rip up all their climate change commitments, but we've seen incredible jobs actually in the US come out of the renewable energy sector. It's gone a lot into those those Republican states. I don't think he's going to rip up
They didn't
those
vote
jobs.
because of those jobs.
But I don't think he's going to rip up those jobs, and I don't think he's going to rip up many of those projects. And when you talk to asset owners around the world, they're not going to get out of America too. So I think he may well rip up the treaty. I think it might be pretty symbolic. But I continue to think America will be pretty on track, to be honest, when it comes to acting on climate change, irrespective of whether Trump is the president or not.
Before we talked about climate change, there was Cyclone Tracy. 50 years on. We'll talk about that in a moment with our great mate, Matt Cunningham, who is in Darwin. James, thank you. Linda, thank you. Longer next time, I promise. But I just had to play the Taylor Swift Trump thing. All right, quick break. Back with more here on Paul Murray Live. Thanks for watching. Royal Report, 13 minutes away from now.